Welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. I'm so glad you're here with us today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of our podcast life. We love that you're out there listening to us, and we want to hear more from you. So feel free to send in questions. Laurel, how are you today? I'm so glad to be back together.
I'm so excited to be here.
And I love our topic for today. So let's jump right in because I feel like we need every moment to really speak into this to our listeners because the topic is recognizing and using your gifts. And every single one of us has a beautiful gift to share with the world, many gifts to share with the world. So listeners, if you don't think that's true, we want you to know we're here to help you find those gifts and bring them out into the world. That's part of what this inner work is all about, right, Laura?
It is. And I also want to mention, if you don't really know what your gifts are yet, it's okay.
Yes.
The increased awareness that you have gifts to bring to the world, just that will help you start to recognize your gifts.
I know. And I think when I think back on my journey to like feeling like I'm really like living into my gifts and exploring more and more of my gifts, right? The older I get, I really feel like most of us, many of us, I don't know if it's most of us, maybe it is, I don't know. Some big portion of us, I think, are actually conditioned to not pay attention to what our true gifts are. We're conditioned to pay attention to doing things right, being good academically, being good in sports, whatever it is, right? So we have all this conditioning oftentimes to break through, to really get on the journey of owning, recognizing, owning, using, exploring our gifts, don't we? Such a journey.
Yes, that's exactly my journey. Mm-hmm. I cannot wait to talk about this. When I think how we are conditioned and how we're taught to improve certain skills that other people believe are valuable, oftentimes valuable to get a job or do well in school so that you can go to college and to get a job, to be promoted, maybe even to get a job in a profession that is lucrative, right? Yeah. Those are the values that we're led to believe are important and what we should be focused on, the skill building, instead of tapping into our gifts.
Yes. I love everything that you just said. I feel like, it really happens from the moment that we're born because our parents, bring whatever conditioning they have around all of what we're talking about into the equation as parents, right? And so unless you have some, what I would call fairly enlightened parents, right, who approach parenting maybe a little differently than what is probably mainstream, you probably right from day one might not have been encouraged to use the gifts that you may have been starting to bring forth. It might have actually been squelched right from the beginning. And so very early on, especially if it's very early on, we lose touch with that. It gets sublimated into our beingness. And we have to literally decide, I want to find what my gifts are. I want to get in touch with that. I want to move beyond that conditioning. And that is a journey. That's some work. And the only one that can do that is each one of us for ourselves, right?
It is true. And it's not just parents. I mean, I know I have my own examples of teachers or my guidance counselor in high school, whoever, the influencers in my life, right? Yeah. So it really does happen from a very young age that sometimes I think about our spark, our fire is put out, right? But let's talk for a minute about how do you define gifts? If our listeners are thinking, what are they talking about? What is a gift?
Right. Yeah. So the first thing I would say is a gift it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your work, right? Like, I think part of what we are, I think because the coaching world has been this collection of people doing business coaching, executive coaching, as well as personal coaching, we kind of have, it's almost like when you look out in the world, like this mistaken thing that your gifts are going to be the thing that you're going to use in your work, or that your work is going to be the gift that you give to the world or whatever. And so that's the first thing I just want to say, that is, when I'm defining a gift, it might not have anything to do with work. It might have nothing to do with your professional, your career life, or any of that. And yet you might have gifts that you bring into that space that allow you to be really good at what you do. So I think of gifts as the natural strengths and abilities that you have in your personality and in your character that when you cultivate them and when you explore them and really grow them, you make a positive impact in the world. I think that would be my off the cuff definition of your gifts. How about you, Laurel?
I love that.
Thank you.
I often speak to clients about, discovering their gifts and talents, and the gifts being, I often say God-given gifts. And I don't mean just God, but the things that, your abilities and your strengths, that are so innate that you really came into this life with, that if they're not nurtured, then they cannot really come to the surface. But I define it as those things, those abilities that you are naturally good at, that there's an ease and a flow to the ability, right? That it just comes naturally to you. And then the more that you nurture it and the more you explore it, you can improve it, but really it's in you. Is really how I try to describe it.
Yeah, that's good. I feel like, it's interesting because I like to use my writing as an example of the complicated relationship that we can have with our gifts, because when I was in school, when I was in high school, and really throughout my whole school career, right, I only got 1 C on my report cards, which is, what we were given back then. And that was in English. And I always struggled in the English classes of my high school life, right, and younger life, in expressing myself, writing well. And what I discovered as I started to journal and then start to write beyond journaling was that my gift of writing really came through my voice and my work of doing inner work with people and doing my own inner work. And I would never have seen that early on in life because I was really too young to recognize that. And I wasn't encouraged to journal at a young age. So I didn't start journaling until my 30s. You started so early, right? I have another girlfriend that started so early too, but journaling was like, I don't know what journaling is. Was that writing in a diary? I don't know. Yeah.
And the other thing that struck me as you were talking about that was, often when we're being taught something like writing, writing when we're in school doesn't present itself as a gift because there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. That we're being judged, a performance-based judgment from other people. And that, I think, completely mask our gifts.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Which is why, I tend to think about gifts often aren't what we're recognized by the world for. It's really, what is in us and needs to come through us.
Yes. And what we discover within ourselves, right? It's our own personal discovery. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have, my experience when I'm going to say it was not until perhaps 2017, 18 timeframe. Now, I was born in 1963, so you can do the math. I was well into my 50s before I really discovered what I consider my number one gift. And that is connecting with other people. Yeah. And it was a gift that I was led to believe was not valuable, important, in fact, a weakness through my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so I don't know if I've mentioned this in past podcast episodes, but, you know, in 8th grade, I was voted class superlative most like Ann Landers, which meant to me, I had a lot of good listening skills and some good advice.
Yeah.
By the time I was 17, my mother, who I loved and admired and took the things that she said to me and about me, took them to heart. She told me that I was much too nice, that all my friends used me. So right away, I took that gift of creating connection with other people and holding space for other people. I took it and buried it.
Yeah, right.
For many, many years. Yeah. And it really wasn't until my own, my own real reflection on what am I doing with my life, that I started to piece together messages from people that told me and reinforced that gift, that I still had that ability, that it was a gift that some people do not have, and that it was easy for me. It filled me. And so I really started thinking about, can't believe I've hidden that all these years. Yeah. And so, discovering your gift and letting it reemerge is just, it's incredible. But we have to get away from, how do other people that we respect and we look up to, the influences in our life, how do they judge our gift?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that oftentimes, because my story goes back to the parenting, right? My dad saying, oh, you're overly emotional, you're overly sensitive, whatever. And so that was always, to me, then became a bad thing. That was a problem to be living with and to be in a relationship with somebody who was overly sensitive and overly emotional, right? And so then I started to try to control that. I saw that as a problem. So it was something that I wanted to hide. And in fact, as a life coach, and particularly as a therapist, these are the gifts that we bring to the table to work with other people, right? Is to be able to feel things deeply, to be able to work with that, to be sensitive to what they're coming in with, to read other people's energy, to like tune into where they are. Like all of that is like the awesome skills, right? Of doing the work that we do. And yet, if you're conditioned early on to think that it's a problem in relationships, you shut it down. And I want to say to our listeners, both men and women, many of the relational skills that many of us have naturally have been dismissed as unimportant in the world. And what I think we're in the discovery of, as we see the rise in the feminine and the changes that are going on in the world, and the invitation to, I think, be more people-oriented, more community-oriented, building culture in the workplace, we see that relational skills are highly important. And in fact, they're critical to the success of many experiences, and particularly work experience as well. So I'm glad to see the tables turning, so to speak, the tide shifting. And those of us that do have really good relational skills are in a good place now to bring those forth and to explore them and to help the world with our gifts, right?
As long as, I'm going to pull out this qualifier, as long as we can accept them as gifts and use them, right? Yes. We have to be brave, courageous. We have to own our gifts. We have to be willing to view them as a gift. I just had a conversation recently with a young woman who has a need for order and structure. She might call it control. And the question of, it's a bad thing. And I, of course, think, well, no, it's a gift. If you view it as a gift and know how to appropriately bring it into the world.
Yes, yes. And that's really the trick. I think that's the trick is number one, bringing it appropriately into the world, and then bringing it into a place where it's also appreciated as a gift, right? Because I know for some people, I think one of the blocks for us in developing ourselves is if we're in primary relationships in our life as we're adults, right? Where our gifts aren't noticed, appreciated, and endorsed as being valuable in any kind of way. So that we remain in that state of not being able to recognize it, not being able to own it as a gift, and finding the place where we can go use it and use it well, right? So that's I would say for any listener that feels like they are on the path of exploring what their gift is and not feeling appreciated or valued in their primary relationship with an S, maybe, that you really want to look at that closely, because this is particularly for women can shut us down completely. Right. Because our relationships are how we survive in the world and how we explore ourselves and grow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really important.
But you may have just opened up a very deep conversation at this very moment. This is a warning for our listeners. This could be a rabbit hole of self-discovery here. But I also would encourage our listeners to look very deeply at themselves. If their primary relationships in their life don't give them the room, the space, the respect to bring their gifts to light, is it because they personally, individually, have not accepted that as a gift, right? And so, this is a fine line between, do we need external indicators to give us permission to be who we really are?
Right. And we don't. But oftentimes we, as women, mistakenly think that we do. I think we see it more with men, but that has to do with, again, going back to women's psychology and relational theory and the reality that our psychology develops in relationship to other people. And so our relationships can really shut us down, even more so, right, than men. And that's just part of science, shall we say, the science of psychology.
Of course. And, I think that's really important, because we do, as women, we live our lives in relationship to others. Right. And we know, we've talked about this, as if the only relationship to others is our driver and not the relationship with ourself and others.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah.
Sometimes we get lost.
Yeah. And the pathway out of that is just what you said, right? Which is beginning to develop a relationship with yourself outside of other relationships, however you're going to explore that, right? And developing a sense of understanding and knowing and honoring what your own gifts are, regardless of what the outside world and relationships might be telling you. Yeah. And there's so many ways to do that, isn't there, Laurel? To go out and explore, to stay in and explore, and to go out and explore.
That's right. And not to have to leave existing relationships, but find a place to bring your gifts where they're, and I believe this wholeheartedly, where our gifts are recognized is where they're needed.
Yes,
right? Maybe our gifts aren't needed in our primary relationships because those relationships have been founded on other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's right? Good. Yes, absolutely.
So much to talk about.
So many places to go with this topic. So I want to keep track of our time.
Yeah.
We're kind of winding in towards the end of the episode. Let's kind of see, let's take a breath, you and I, and say, okay, what else coming into the conversation did you know that for you was important to share with our listeners around recognizing and using your gifts? Anything else come up?
Well, we talked a lot about recognizing them and how to use them or where to use them. And I guess I would just remind our listeners that it is really a process.
Yeah.
Based on my own experience, it's not as if I recognized it one day and I was using it the next day.
Yeah.
Right.
Good. Yes.
Not like a new blender.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
It's a process that you really have to grow into and develop that awareness, and then reflect on where is it needed? What is, what is the place and the value you bring to the community, to the world, to your relationships by bringing this gift to light, right? So be patient, take time. Maybe it's a discover, reflect, grow, process again and again.
Yeah. Well, Laurel, I just want to say that was a great, I think, suggestion even to our listeners, right? Discover, what were the three words? Discover, explore.
Discover, reflect, grow.
Discover, reflect, grow. That's great. Reflect, discover, grow. Those might switch around a little bit, but I think you're right in terms of, even when I think back of growing my work life as a life coach and as a writer, speaking, all of these activities, right? It was discovering, that interests me. I want to do that, right? That seems good. And then reflecting on that a little bit, exploring it, and then growing it through some education, through experience, through practice. So there's kind of a rhythm and a process to this discovery, right? That we're talking about, and this recognition and then using. Good. Yeah. Great. So, for our listeners,
what about you?
Yeah. When I think about, I think it comes back to a couple episodes ago, we did a podcast on tuning into your desires, or maybe it was the last episode, is our gifts oftentimes are connected with the desires that we have in our heart for what we want for ourselves, for the world, for our family. So these can be clues too. If you're feeling like, I don't know what my gift is, or I feel like I should know more, or whatever, sometimes you might be just calling it something else, right? Which might be your desire to see harmony and peace in the world. And so you oftentimes find yourself volunteering at the food bank, or, whatever it is you're doing, right? That is connected to this idea of how you want to show up and how you want to share your gift with the world. And your gift with the world might be in service, and it's maybe small acts of service and connecting with others around that. So it's not like, oh, this is my gift and this is what I do and this is how I do it. I'm a writer, I write a book and I'm so gifted in this. Like this, it might not sound like that. It might sound like something different. I just want to be a part of making the world a more beautiful place, or more harmonious, or raising the consciousness around, women's rights, or whatever it could be. It could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be like the way we think about it. It's often like, I always think of, this is how we think about art. Art is painting, it's writing a song, it's, and art is whatever you make beautiful and create from your own little hands, right? Yeah. So we want to broaden our I think my invitation is to broaden your thinking around gifts too, as well.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Laurel, I think it's time for us to wrap up for today, but I will see you next week in our podcast. We'll be back for more. Looking forward to it. anything else before we run off?
No, just this was a great, great conversation today. As always.
I know. And I just feel like, wouldn't the world be so beautiful if everybody could recognize and use their gifts? Wouldn't the world be so much more beautiful and harmonious and exciting? And we'd all be called into, I think, and inspired into finding our gifts more and more. So let's go out there, everybody, and do the exploration. Find your gifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And be brave and courageous enough to use them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Enjoy the process along the way. Oh, make it a joyful process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Off we go. Thanks,
Bye
Laurel.
for now.
See you next
Bye.
time. Bye.